On behalf of our conveners, the Ministry of the ICT, and your hosts, the ICT Authority, and our title sponsors, SAP, we're really delighted to see you here today. And we have a special about 8% of you who've been to every 5 Connected Kenya summits, and it's such a great show of commitment. And this year, our theme is Breaking Barriers. And as we look at the theme, we want to let you know, through our speakers, our panelists, our moderators, and you delegates, that we want you to challenge us, to think of original ideas, inspire us to see how we can use ICT to serve the citizen better and make this country into a middle-income country. Welcome onto stage your first moderator who will invite your speakers and take us through the very first session, Andrew Lewela.
It is now my pleasure to present to you our initial welcome plenary. And before that, allow me about 2 minutes to just unpack our thinking for this welcome plenary. In the early 90s, actually, just post the Cold War, the US Army coined an acronym called VUCA, V-U-C-A. And for them, post-Cold War, it was clear that the environment they were living in was 1, very volatile, 2, uncertain, 3, complex, and finally, ambiguous. 2 decades later, that hasn't changed. We still live in a very VUCA environment. And so in planning 12, 18 months out for Kenya, for East Africa, and globally, leaders are required to have a new set of skills. And so in thinking about this session, we will be exploring what is this different leader you need to plan for the complex world we live in. And I propose to you that the new VUCA leader will need vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. And it's now my singular pleasure to invite my panelists who will help us with the welcome plenary. In no particular order, may I welcome Victor Kyalo, the ICT Authority CEO. Karibu sana.
Let me start by appreciating the presence of our Permanent Secretary, Mr. Joseph Tiampati, our Chair of the Board, Honorable Edwin Yinda, distinguished guests, and all the sponsors who are in this room, and in particular to recognize the presence of a number of people who've been with us over the years, starting with the immediate past Chair of the Board, Madam Catherine Gahu, whom I saw around, our previous Minister, Minister Pogisho, who is around, and 2 guests, I believe actually around 4 guests who've come from the region, starting with the Minister for ICT in Rwanda. Ladies and gentlemen, let me appreciate the fact that this is the 6th summit, and we have some people who've been here with us over the years, since the first Connected Kenya, which took place, and we had quite a number of few people. I think we were less than 60 then. It has grown to an event which Kaburo has just alluded to, where we've had quite some interesting decisions made, and we've been able to move forward. I believe I can say without any contradiction, this is the only space where we normally have so many competitors, because we know most of the sponsors here are competitors, who come and cooperate during this time, and we set the agenda for what we are going to do next. It's also seen quite a number of good ideas come out of it, some of which we are beginning to see the implementation now. Most notable idea which has come from this forum has been the demand or the request by the private sector to see us in the public sector a bit more organized, and by having one focal ICT institution from where all contacts and projects will be coordinated. Fortunately, this has now been realized in the form of ICTA, which, as we speak today, the institutional arrangements have been completed, and we are, for the first time, beginning to get the different parts of this institution working. Just to give you a brief snip of what we are looking at having a very clear infrastructure and systems approach strategy within ICTA. We are looking at having a very well-defined market development structure, how we'll partner and coordinate with the market. We are looking at a very clear government enterprise architecture, and I think yesterday in the fireside somebody said, and I totally agree with him, the issue here is not the technology, it's not the resources, it's actually how we do an end-to-end project and finish it within the specified time. We are looking at addressing information security in a more structured manner, and in doing all this, most important for us is to ensure that we deliver trusted services both to the citizens and all our partners. We'll also leverage on the new thinking which has come in place, especially in partnerships. Today, I think the PPP Directorate at Treasury has come of age, and the engagement and how to work with them has become very clear. Again, one of the comments I had during our meetings in the last 2 days, where we were meeting with the county executives, and yesterday we had the firesides and a lot of interactions, is that I think we've misunderstood what PPP is all about. It's not about the projects which rake in billions, it's also about the small projects which make a difference. They may be in terms of hundreds of thousands, but they can build up to the billions. I think I'll attribute this to the CEC, my colleague from Laikipia, who actually challenged the people providing solutions here to try and make one of the counties a model county. As we look at this, one of the things I'm very convinced myself is that we've had the solutions, we've had the resources. What has been holding us? I want to conclude my brief remarks, as usual, by quoting a slogan which I like. And fortunately, the owners are not here to sue me, but the point is, let's just do it. Thank you.
Sometimes we joke in the office with the CEO, and he always reminds me that he's one of the, and this is a Kenyan joke, top 100 most influential Kambas. So there you have him. It is now my pleasure to invite for the keynote from our SAP partners, the GM East Africa, Andrew Waititu.
Wow, fantastic turnout. And if yesterday's fireside chat is anything to go by, I think we'll have some very interesting discussions over the next couple of days. First, let me recognize all the delegates, the distinguished guests, our co-sponsors. It gives us great pleasure to be here again as SAP for the 6th and undoubtedly largest Connected Kenya event. Excuse me. ICT has, over the last 4 decades, established itself as a general-purpose technology that has greatly affected human society. ICT has spurred changes that will continue into the foreseeable future, whether it's how we interact or whether it's in the economy. Gone are the days where the first point of stop for recruiters was your references. They first go into your Facebook account, they go to LinkedIn, and even things like Pinterest to try and understand a bit more about this person. The net has become the de facto source of entertainment, news, social connectivity, and whatever next new thing that your organization is coming up with, irrespective of what it is, had better have internet connection or it is dead in the water, whether we need it or not. ICT is behind this revolution that has driven economies to grow, business empires to crumble, and there's no question that ICT, like steam power and electricity before it, is the current force of global change. Much of the attention that is paid to ICT is focused on the producers of their products. Much less attention is being paid on how ICT is shaping the way society is changing and in turn being shaped by society. We need to be able to ask ourselves 3 crucial questions. How is ICT driving living standards as measured by societal and cultural development and economic growth? How is the diffusion of ICT affecting the distribution of benefits between and among various social, cultural, and economic entities? How do government policy, business strategy, and consumer behavior either encourage or constrain the realization of ICT's full potential? I believe there is no doubt that the government of Kenya has the right intentions as far as adoption and use of ICT as a tool for development. However, we must all recognize that the benefits of ICT and investments in technology are not always tangible or measurable. I would like to talk about 3 points briefly around the benefits to the citizen, cost savings through shared services, and the role of the private sector. This year, the summit will focus on the digital transformation agenda. However, we must be able to link this agenda directly to a benefit to the citizen. If we cannot describe the benefit of whatever citizen service that we are creating to, in quotes, Mama Wanjiku, then it is not something that maybe we should do, and we should be brave enough to rethink it. One thing that we are good at measuring is cost. It's the easiest. What we are not good at measuring is the value. And I would like to refer here to a good friend and former colleague, Louis Otieno of Microsoft, who once talked about being able to provide government services to citizens, and the value would be in the savings that they make without having to travel to get those services in our central, in our cities and other commercial centers. That is the value that I think we are finding difficult to measure. Secondly, we must also recognize that governments will always be cash-strapped. In light of competing priorities for funding, ICT is seen as expensive, and if done wrong, it is. We must be able to create savings where we can by driving shared services, consumption of cloud services, where real and proven benefits from this model are there for the taking. Often, a lot of the pushback is based on myth and misinformation, for example, around security. I know a lot of you still are using primarily, cloud service email. And it doesn't even occur to you around how that email is kept up and running and giving you literally 100% availability. There's a lot of knowledge that goes to the back of that. Lastly, the role of the private sector in driving agendas for the public sector. There must be a continuous conversation between the two sectors. Many of the private sector companies represented here, whether local or global, have more experience than the public sector in driving ICT projects. We must be able to jointly formulate a plan to drive the future investments in ICT for the country as a whole for our mutual benefit. As SAP, we are proud to be involved in this event, the 6th Connected Kenya, and which is no doubt the crown event of public and private sector partnership in ICT, and I think in many other industries across the region. We are glad to see continual growth in terms of the number and quality of attendees. And this year, SAP and our partners will be launching a few exciting new developments in services that we're able to bring to market here that you'll see over the course of the next 2 days. So we ask you to engage with us, engage with the people in this room, our co-sponsors, the public sector. Let's make the 6th Connected Kenya the best that they have ever been. Thank you very much.
It's now my pleasure to invite our next speaker, who will shed a bit more light on the ICT landscape. And I hope some of the knowledge he shares is not news to you, but if it is, that is the impact we need to bestow onto you. So our next speaker, who is all the way from South Africa, is Mr. Mark Walker, who is with the IDC, and he will do a short paper on the ICT landscape in Kenya. Welcome, Mark.
What's really encouraging is to see how Kenya has absolutely started to become the role model for the African continent. In terms of CECOM landed and Kenya exploded. One of the things that's really stood out for me, with CECOM landing and so on, we've seen this huge explosion, and we've heard today this is the sixth event today. When you look at 6 years of progress that have passed, what has happened? Compare that to a child. When you're 6 years old, you go to school. Why do you go to school? Because you need guidance, you need to learn, you need to take it to the next level. And I think this is where Kenya is right now. I've been fortunate enough to be doing research and consulting in Kenya since 1998, and I've managed to see the growth of this child, if you like. And it's really interesting to see how it continues to develop and how forward-thinking and how progressive the Kenyan market has become. And indeed, setting the tone for a lot of the region in East Africa and indeed Africa. With that, I'd like to just move on to my presentation. So, I think the key thing that we've seen is there's no doubt that ICT contributes to economic growth. We've had study after study, World Bank studies, just on the impact of telecom, for instance, the laying of infrastructure from broadband through to mobile, through to internet, getting all these technologies down and seeing the impact that this has on economic growth. What does economic growth do? It improves it floats the boat higher, if I can put it very simply. Everybody benefits when the economy grows. And I think and this is not something that is just a World Bank study. We always look at World Bank studies, and there's a degree of skepticism at times. We say, well, that might work, but then again, it might not. And we say, well, many studies have proven that ICT definitely has a definite, measurable impact on the growth of an economy and the upliftment from a social perspective within an economy. The key thing there, and Andrew referred to this, is you've got to be clear on what are the benefits. And there are macroeconomic benefits, which are the investment, attraction of investment, higher productivity in the marketplace itself, attraction of public finance and the growth of public finance to fund projects and so on. But more importantly are the micro issues. And I think this reflects certainly on the director's discussion earlier about the diffusion of technology across, right from the smallest rural area to the biggest cities in Kenya, from the smallest counties, the most rural, the most undeveloped, right through to cities like Mombasa and Nairobi. It's got to be clear that the benefits are very clear to everybody. And for this to happen, the key thing that technology brings is asymmetry of information. So everybody is equally informed, from the guy in the rural township right through to the guy in his boardroom in Nairobi. If there's sufficient technology around, everybody has access to the same information. This enables greater collaboration, this enables greater cohesion, greater alignment, and ultimately greater growth. So very, very important, and I've only chosen the one aspect there, asymmetry. Coupled with asymmetry is relevance. If technology is not relevant, and it's not immediately felt, or felt in a short term, it becomes irrelevant. It becomes a white elephant. Nobody cares about it. Something to think about. Where we are from a technology perspective, however, I've spoken about the economic impact. I've spoken now about what are the benefits that are sought. How does this actually play out? What is the technology in the next 3 to 5 years that is going to enable this to happen? First of all, there are 4 key technologies, and IDC calls them the third platform. And these 4 technologies are the cloud, basically big data, mobility, and security. Okay, these are the 4 big areas that are very, very key for the growth of technology going forward. All the technology that you'll see deployed now is around these 4 areas. And this is the next stage. We've gone through the first stage, which was basically the initial connected environment. Then we went through to the hyper-connect environment. Now everybody's connected environment. I think that's where the future is going to grow, and that's where the big growth is also going to be coming from. And the beauty of this third platform, it is relevant at every level. So if you go to a consumer level, it is relevant. You can read your emails anywhere, anytime, as long as you've got telephone connectivity or smartphone connectivity. From an industrial perspective, if you have a manufacturing concern, you can have a dark factory. From a healthcare perspective, you can do remote and diagnostics and telemedicine. From a governmental perspective, you can deliver technology-based services anywhere, anytime, based on really good decision-making that's enabled by big data and mobility. So a very, very key area, this third platform, and I'd suggest everybody in the room to consider this third platform as you consider going the next 2 to 3 years in the technology environment in Kenya and indeed across the region. Looking then specifically at Kenya, we've seen massive dropping in terms of cost and massive adoption in terms of mobile, in terms of internet access. These are just 3 of the key indicators that IDC watches on a continual basis. Huge growth, much more affordable. Message takeaway there. And this drives a complete technology revolution. If we look at the spend in Kenya over the last couple of years, I've taken this up to 2030, end of last year, and the trajectory going forward is very similar. Slightly smaller because of the law of numbers in terms of growth rate, but overall we're still seeing huge growth. The data you see in front of you there, that a technology market of around $5 billion US in 2013. That includes the telco spend, hardware spend, software spend, and services spend in the marketplace. And the correlation there, importantly, to economic growth. Very strong tracking, even in times where the economy has gone down. If you take your eye to 2009, 2010, the GDP growth has gone slow down. Technology spend has not. Very, very key indicator. And funnily enough, the driver of future technology growth also. The technology growth, in fact, will drive economic growth. Where is this growth going to come from? And I think it's important just to break that big number down, that 5 billion down, and see how does that break out. By all means, going forward, going into the future, here's a future view up to 2017 from IDC's perspective. We're looking at still a large amount of spend is on the telco area. That is on infrastructure, on carrier-related equipment and services. Very much getting the cable in the ground, getting the fiber in the ground, getting the connectivity to those rural areas so that everybody can participate. Everything about driving access. So still very much the biggest part of spend. Similarly, we see from a hardware perspective, the devices and the access devices, if you like, that enable the usage of that. That's the second biggest area of spend, technology, going over the next couple of years. However, it is reducing. It still makes up the biggest portion, but it's reducing. And the areas that we're seeing growth in is in software and services space, very, very strongly. Software in terms of application software, as it diffuses across industry and in terms of consumer applications, but also very much in the services space, technology-based services. Take companies like CCOM and so on, you'll see a lot of the next step is the connectivity is there. What do you do next? How do you exploit this, take this to the next level? And the only way to do this is through value-added services. And we'll see a lot more growth in value-added services. A lot of it driven from the consumer space, just as we saw PCs first coming into corporates via their accountants. Okay, they came from the private sector, they came in, and then they would diffuse through the corporate. We'll see similar kind of things now. The apps you download on your smartphone, start seeing the rise of corporate applications and so on. A lot more of that kind of devices coming in. Also, business models and technology models that support that thinking. In terms of spend, who is doing all this spending? Just a quick analysis of where that spending is. And we'll see a lot of it is still coming from the consumer. That is basically on devices, your smartphones, your tablets, your PCs, and so on. And the home is also part of that discussion. The communication sector, I mentioned the telcos earlier. The important ones here are the government and the banking sector. Government in the delivery of services and the impact of those services. How do they drive those services into the marketplace? Government has to spend quite a lot of money in terms of rolling out those services, rolling out the connectivity, and so on. One of the interesting areas is the banking and the financial service sector. Because it is directly tied to the success of their business, it is really important for banks to understand and deploy technology to make it as easy and accessible to the consumer across the board. So if you look at just driving to Mombasa last night, if I wanted to do banking transactions in South Africa, as long as I had connectivity, I could transact. Banks are thinking in very, very interesting ways of how to deliver services to anybody, anywhere, anytime. Surely with a commercial interest, but I think the government sector can take a few lessons on how the banks actually drive these things. Then, the other areas is manufacturing and some of the other verticals that are also interesting, more in the factory space, the dark factories, the manufacturing sector, and so on. Also in the energy sector, we're seeing a lot of interesting developments and expenditure on the technology landscape. That mentioned, it's also interesting to see what is the impact. I know the University of Nairobi has recently done some studies on the impact of VAT, for instance, and how VAT impacts the industry, how the cost of technology impacts and how that cost is passed on. And there's a paper, I believe, that is going to be released soon on that is worth having a look at. Brings us the question then, and I think the question is, why do we bother with an ICT master plan? Surely market forces will dominate, competition will sort all of this out. No. Countless examples have shown us that without a clear master ICT plan or a national ICT policy, the rate of development is very, very uneven. It's very commercially focused, and it does not bring the benefits that it's designed to bring. Who loses out? The rural areas lose out. The disenfranchised lose out. The poorer communities lose out, and they're the guys who need it the most. Okay, areas like education get neglected. Areas like healthcare get neglected. So there's a real need for a national ICT master plan. What does it do? It helps you anticipate the future. It helps you prioritize your strategic responses and comes up with detailed actions. Not fuzzy, wuzzy, let's put this in the air stuff, real stuff. What is going to happen and how is this going to impact? What benefit is it going to bring? It helps allocate budgets and resources fairly and equitably. Where's the greatest need? Where does the budget get allocated? So it's not just pet projects and stuff like that that gets allocated. The one really big thing of an ICT master plan is it improves internal communications, collaboration, and alignment. Oftentimes we've seen countries, and I've been fortunate to be involved in national ICT plans in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in Dubai, in Kenya, in fact, in Egypt, in South Africa to a very limited degree, and also in Tanzania. And the interesting part is where a strong ICT master plan is in place, you see quick development, fast steps, fast benefits, immediate relevance. Where in areas where it's half-heartedly adopted or there's too much interference in this plan, we see a very, very spotty or very patchy way of doing it. And I think the final point on this is developing a common starting point. If everybody knows where we're starting and where we're going to, starting with the end in mind, to quote a famous Stephen Covey statement, develop a common starting point, and you move off from there. Great, then you're in the right place. And finally, to have the feedback loop. I'm a frustrated engineer, so I love feedback loops. And if you don't know how successful you are until you know what you're measuring, how fast you're measuring it, and how successful, what is the difference, what is the delta been? And I think that's where we are in Kenya now. We need to start really thinking seriously, where is the delta? What have we done? How successful has it been? How do we use that information to sharpen the edge further? And finally, what makes a good ICT master plan? It's got to be very transparent from participatory. It's got to be very realistic. It's got to get everybody into action. There's got to be a clear action plan. It's got to be galvanizing. It should be very fresh and it should be very continuous. It's not a plan that gets built and then thrown in the cupboard and a year later looked at again. This has got to be ongoing. This is a living thing. And finally, it's got to be highly accountable. No accountability, no success. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Asante and Nabahayi Nejema, thank you very much for your attention. And I hope we have good luck going forward.
The first two speakers, I think, spent more time looking back, taking stock, and trying to project the future. And so I'm hoping to the last two speakers, we look more on the how, so the governance around that, and possibly some of the policy issues to tackle. And so, without any further ado, I'd like to invite the chairman of the ICT Authority, Honorable Edwin Yinda, who in turn will invite the PS to wrap up the welcome plenary. Welcome, Chair.
Good morning, everybody. It is my pleasure to welcome you this morning to the Connected Kenya 2014 Summit. Thank you all for making it to this year's conference, and I hope you are all fully energized and optimistically looking forward to listen and contribute to the discussions that will take place in the next 2 days. I personally look forward to the deliberations, healthy debates, and networking opportunities that are promised in this forum. As the chairman of the newly appointed ICT Authority Board, I'm passionate of our mandate, which covers ICT projects, implementation, and management, and efficiency and effectiveness in delivering services to Kenyans. This is because, as the board, we are firmly convinced of the crucial role that ICT plays in driving the economic, social, and political development of Kenya as envisaged in Vision 2030. Among the issues that we plan to achieve at this year's conference is the launch of the revised National ICT Master Plan 2017. We also plan to have deeper and more detailed discussions in all the sessions. Finally, we shall come up with the key recommendations at each of the panels, which will inform the conference report that eventually will be tracked to their implementation. As the ICT Authority Board, our objective is to create cohesion and partnerships for the good of this industry. We also expect to harmonize ICT budgets in line with the priorities in our work plans in order to achieve the desired transformation agenda. We are, of course, alive to the fact that our mandate can only be achieved if we cultivate strong links with all of you, that is the government organs, private sector, development partners, and academia. That is also why Connected Kenya Summit offers integral part of these interactions and networking. Today, I have my full board. I think two of my board members, one will make it this afternoon. That is Professor Elijah will come this afternoon. Dr. Bertha Dena is sick, so she's not with us today. The other members are here, and if you are here, please, you just stand up and wave to show your presence. We have Engineer Waithaka representing Ministry of Lands. Thank you, Engineer. We have David Mugo. Thank you, David. We have Professor Tim Waema. Thank you, Professor. We have Ms. Esther Kibere. We have Mr. Ugas Mohammed. He hasn't come in yet. Of course, the CEO, Victor Kyalo, who is here with us, and of course the PS who will be addressing you shortly. Once again, karibuni sana to Connected Kenya Summit 2014. Enjoy yourself, have fun. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to invite our PS, Mr. Joseph Tiampati.
Good morning, everybody. I was expecting to see a number of cabinet ministers. I'm aware that we have the cabinet minister for Communications, Science and Technology, Uganda, Honorable Jonas Asira is around, but I'm not sure whether he's in the plenary as yet. And Honorable Jean Philip Nsengimana, Minister of Youth and ICT Rwanda, is also around, but if he, I don't know whether he's, no, not yet. I'm sure they'll be joining us shortly. I also want to acknowledge the Permanent Secretary, Telecommunication and Postal Services, South Sudan, Engineer Juma Stephen Luga, who is in our midst. I'm not sure whether the Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Communication, Science and Technology from Tanzania has arrived. He was also expected short. Maybe he'll be joining us in the course of the day. ICT county executives, how many do we have today? Can we see by a show of hands? Thank you. I see we have quite a number of ICT county executives. Industry players, stakeholders, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, hamjambo. It is my pleasure to join you this morning at the opening of the 6th Connected Kenya Summit to discuss the development of information, communication, and technology in the country towards the realization of our development roadmap, Vision 2030. From the outset, I wish to thank ICT Authority, the organizer of this event, for inviting me to address this occasion. I also wish to extend a warm welcome to our visitors from the region, representatives of various governments, and all senior officials present. It is noteworthy that ICT implementation and development falls within the mandate of my ministry. Indeed, forums such as this provide opportunities within which working partnership models can be established towards the integration of technology into our country's wider development agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, the Connected Kenya Summit, which incorporates counties, the theme adopted this year, Breaking the Barriers, is quite ideal for exploring methods of overcoming challenges that hinder our efforts to leap into the digital economy. I truly trust that deliberations that will take place at this summit will set us on a map, on a path to making progress in national ICT implementation, growing the ICT industry, and achieving more public participation. Indeed, it is indeed a pleasure for my ministry, through the ICT Authority, to host this forum, and a great honor to have so many distinguished minds and experts participate in the various sessions that will take place. The topics discussed at this forum are very pertinent to our industry growth. Issues of counties, digital transformation, cyber threats, and cashless payments, and data analytics are priority areas. As you are aware, Kenya launched its Vision 2030 development blueprint in the year 2008, aiming to transform this country into an industrialized nation. In this national vision, in information, communication technology, ICT has been recognized as one of the most significant enablers towards achieving the vision by the year 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, the government is keen to promote partnerships with globally renowned ICT companies to facilitate knowledge and capacity transfer to our Kenyan companies. Lastly, I wish to express my gratitude to the organizers, sponsors of this workshop, and wish you fruitful deliberations during this workshop and call for continued support in the country's ICT sector. It is my hope that this forum will create awareness on ICT activities and create awareness on the government and counties' investment in the ICT sector. Before I finish, I just want to mention one or two things that I have in mind that for this particular forum. One is that it is very clear that the Kenyan people have very high expectations of the ICT sector. And these expectations are not unrealistic. They're expectations that we can be able to meet. In the global arena, it is clear that ICT is a key driver to economies all over the world. In fact, it is now recognized as the fifth factor of production. And while we keep on talking about infrastructure, I think infrastructure has been a very key theme in development, particularly in our country and even in the region. And we've been talking about roads, we've been talking about energy and petroleum, and we've been talking about so many other things that have to do with infrastructure. But I think we need to recognize that ICT is now what is known as the 21st century infrastructure. In fact, we made an effort recently in the discussions we had during the Northern Corridor Infrastructure Summit and we actually introduced ICT as one of the critical infrastructure that need to be put into the discussion within that framework. And it's good that now that's one of the ICT infrastructure is one of the infrastructure items that are under discussion within the East African region. I think in terms of what has happened over the past 1 year, several things have happened. One, of course, is the ICT authority, which has now been established and has merged the various institutions, the ICT board and e-government and what is known as JITS. So we now have ICT authority, and I'm happy that we now have a board chaired by Honorable Yinda. And I want to thank that team for doing a very good job. And now we have an institution that can take leadership of ICT-related issues within the country. And secondly, is last year we launched the what is known as the National Broadband Strategy. And it's now very clear that we do have a strategy for ensuring that we are all connected. In order to connect the country, to make sure that broadband goes to all the counties. In fact, we now have about 34 counties which are connected, and we are trying, hopefully in another 1.5 years, to connect the remaining counties so that all the 47 counties have broadband. And the other accomplishment I want to mention is the issue of the ICT Master Plan, which we are going to launch during this Connected Kenya forum. So the ICT Master Plan has gone through a number of stages and stakeholder discussions. And during this forum, we'll have the opportunity, maybe I think in the course of the day, in the afternoon, we'll have the opportunity to launch ICT Master Plan. And then we are also developing the Cybersecurity Master Plan and strategy. And this is now at an advanced stage. These are also going to be presented at this forum. And we expect that we shall be able to get input from the ICT players who are present, so that in very near future, perhaps in the next few weeks, we should be able to launch the Cybersecurity Master Plan. And lastly is the digital transformation of government. Mwendega Tabaki is here, and I'm sure she'll have an opportunity to share with us about the digital transformation of government. There's a project that we have, which we hope that in the next few months, we should be able to transform the way things work within government. We want to have a digital government, the ICT ministry, the ICT authority, and other stakeholders and other government ministries will be working together to make sure that we develop what is known as a single source of truth by ensuring that we develop a national master database of persons and assets and establishments, as well as land. But we want to begin with making sure that we have a master database of persons within the country and a reliable source of data on every individual within the country. So that would mean actually we will have to register people afresh in the next few months, so that we do have a reliable database of persons within the country. This is one of the major contributions of ICT in the very near future. So with those remarks, I would like to wish you very, very fruitful deliberations. And it is true that some people say that this is a talking shop, but I believe that we are going to prove them wrong through the next few days of, I believe, very, very fruitful engagement. And I'm sure these forums are going to produce good ideas as we move forward into the future. and basically for ICT to be able to have position itself strongly within this economy. Thank you very much.
We have a token of appreciation which we'd like to present to our panelists. It's a new introduction to Connected Kenya, and so if you're a panelist somewhere, you can be rest assured you'll enjoy your token. And so I'll just start with the CEO.
izandla phezulu